This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Abam, welcome everyone. Parshas Shoftim. So this is our first year in Elul. So this week we're going to speak about a very interesting subject. It's actually monetary halachos, and it's very fundamental yediyos in understanding payment in general. We're not yet learning Divrei Musar. It's not Divrei Hisayrus. It's Torah. Torah is what the neshama needs. Barasi Yetzahara, Barasi Torah Tavlin. All of us, we have a Yetzahara, and the Rebbe Shem gave us a medicine, a medication, and that's Torah. Even if you're not learning Musar, even if you're not learning Machshava, Torah elevates a person. Even if it's the area of monetary laws, one would think, I'm learning about when I have to pay, when I don't have to pay. And nevertheless, the Gemara says, if you want to be righteous, you want to be pious, you have to learn Milei Din Azikin, you have to learn the laws of payments. So this is also, this is part of the Torah just as much as anything. And it's all something that will elevate our neshama. Okay, so we're going to present it in a story form. We'll make it easy. And they're going to be basically four principles that you need to know. And if you walk away knowing those four principles, you'll be head and shoulders above everybody else. Okay, so the story goes like this. What does it have to do with this week's Parsha? Well, this week's Parsha we have the war. That those who go out to battle, if you have a guy who's a coward or a scaredy cat and he's afraid, so you basically send him home. So that's the loose connection to today's subject, or a very loose connection. Basically what happened was, it was the month of Teves in Tafshin Samachtes, 2009, and hundreds, maybe thousands of missiles were being shot from Gaza to the nearby cities. I think, what's the nearest city to Gaza? Sderot, yeah, and many Yidden who lived in Sderot had to flee, especially people who were not protected over there. They lived in homes that were open target, and one particular family, Reuven's family, fled. They skedaddled, they left, and they ran away. They didn't want to be within firing range of all the missiles from Gaza. Meanwhile, Shimon, he also lives in the city, and Shimon lived in a house with a very weak roof, very much open target to the missiles, and Shimon doesn't know what to do. Shimon, he doesn't have relatives outside of Sderot, so he's stuck in the city, but he figures his only option is somehow he needs to get into a house that's better protected than where he is. Now, Reuven already fled town, and Reuven locked up his home. He barred his home. Meanwhile, Shimon tries to call Reuven. Hey, Reuven, look, I have nowhere to go. You mind if I stay in your home, at least in the meantime? He can't get in touch with Reuven. So basically, he has no alternative. He breaks down Reuven's door, and he lives in Reuven's house. Now, the thing is, Reuven's house was much nicer than Shimon's house. Shimon had maybe 2 bedrooms. Shimon had a small kitchen. And Reuven had a swimming pool in his basement. Reuven had the works. Reuven had a fully loaded house. And Shimon moves in, and Shimon's there for 2 weeks. The missiles are flying overhead. His life is in peril, but he's living it up in Reuven's house. I mean, he's never lived so luxuriously as these 2 weeks in Reuven's house. And the 2 weeks are up, and Reuven comes back, and, excuse the expression, like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, Reuven comes into the house, and who's sleeping in my bed? Shimon's snoring away in Reuven's bed. He wakes up. What are you doing in my bed? You know, Shimon says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Shuldik Meir, but I try to get in touch with you. I try to let you know, but under the circumstances, I had no alternative other than to break into your house." Obviously, it goes without saying. First of all, Shimon says to Reuven, "I just want you to know, this was, the most enjoyable." This was the most enjoyable 2 weeks of my life. I mean, all your amenities and the cleaning lady and all the different luxurious things you have at home. This was really wonderful. But obviously, it goes without saying that I'm going to pay you rent. And Reuven says, "No, I'm not taking a penny from you. If you don't owe me the money, I will not take the money from you." So basically, Rabbi Glatstein, the shaila is, does Shimon have to pay Reuven for living in his home for free. Now, it didn't cost Reuven anything. Reuven did not lose any money. Reuven wasn't living there anyway. It wasn't like he was going to get rent for that house. This is what we call a classic case of Zeh nene v'zeh chasar. Shimon was nene. Shimon benefited from living in Reuven's house, and Reuven didn't lose any money. He wasn't there anyway. This is a classic case of Zeh nene v'zeh chasar. And this is the shaila that was presented to Rabbi Glatstein. We know he has many interesting svarim of very far-out cases. I think in English now they have English book What If. They have the book What If. Well, this was the shaila brought to Rabbi Glatstein. Now, if you remember back from your yeshiva days, this is hardcore Bava Kama. Now, sometimes you learn Bava Kama when you're younger, and you don't think it could ever be relevant lamaisa. You think cows and oxen and goring but if Bava Kama is learned practically and in the correct way, Bava Kama is actually the most noigea topic. I mean, these are halachas that come up every single day: how to buy, how to sell, damage, and so forth. So, we want to go through very carefully one of the fundamental sugyos of Bava Kama, Zeh nene v'zeh chasar. It's actually about a blot and a half of Gemara. We're not going to speak out everything. We're just going to review the main concepts. It starts in Bava Kama Daf Chaf Amud Aleph. It wraps around to Chaf Amud Beis, and then back to Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. Okay, and while we do so, we're going to learn a lot of very important principles of Dinei Mamonos. Okay, so if you have on your sheets, if anybody needs a sheet, we have some extras over here. The Gemara begins like this: Amar le Rav Chizda l'Rami bar Chama. Rav Chizda says to Rami bar Chama, Loihavis Gabon beorta betchuma. Rav Chizda says to Rabbi bar Chama, isn't it too bad? You weren't with us in the Tchum last night. Now, what does that mean? You weren't with us in the Tchum? Either it means Rami bar Chama was out of the Tchum Shabbos, so he was not able to come to discuss learning with Rav Chizda, or the Tchum refers to the Beis HaMedrash. They would often put the Beis HaMedrash in a very centrally located place within the Tchum of all the nearby cities. This way everybody could join in the Beis HaMedrash. And basically Rav Chizda says to Rami bar Chama, isn't it too bad you weren't with us last night in the Tchum? The Ibaylan Mili Mal Yasa. We had a lot of good shilos in the Beis Medrash last night. So Rami bar Chama says, let me in. Tell me what they discussed in the Beis Medrash last night. Amar my Mili Mal Yasa. Tell me a few of the nice things that they said in the Beis Medrash. Amar le. So Rav Chizda said, we had a shaila. Hadar b'chatzar chaveroi shaloi midaitai tzarach lahalis leischar oyin tzarach. If somebody moves into someone else's house without the consent of the owner, does he have to pay rent or does he not have to pay rent? Now, let's just say off the bat, if I'm standing there in my house and I say, hey pal, where are you going? And the guy says, look, you're not going to get rent for this house anyway. I'm moving into your house. And I say, get out of here, go fly a kite. Then everybody agrees if the guy goes in, you could charge him rent. In other words, if the owner voices his complaint and the guy violates the complaint, of course the owner could charge money. What we're talking about is if you slip into a guy's house and the guy doesn't know, it's unknowing to the owner doesn't know, the owner's in the Catskills. So it's a good plan. You need a place to sleep, go to Flatbush during the summer, everybody's in the mountains, and that's the shot. You move into somebody's house for 2 months. If the person says no, of course you got to pay him. But what about if the person doesn't say anything? Do you got to pay rent? Or in correct English, do you have to pay rent? So the Gemara says like this, Hey Chidami, what's the case? Okay, this is the key of the sugya. There are 4 possible cases. Basically, there are 2 variables. Whenever there are 2 variables, you always have 4 cases. Hey chidami, ilema b'chatzer delay kaima la'agra. If we're talking about a house which is not normally rented out, let's say the owner of the house does not normally rent out his house. It's not a house that he rents out. V'gavra delay yavid l'megar, and the guy doesn't normally rent out houses. Listen to the case. We're talking about a house. This guy, the owner of the house, never rents out the house. He doesn't want to get money from it. He has no interest in getting money from it. He has no plans on getting money from it. He never rents out his house. What would that mean? That means if somebody's living in the house, he's not causing a lacking. He's not causing diminution. He's not being mechasar. He's not causing a loss to the owner of the home, because the owner of the home anyway would not rent out the house. He's not making the owner of the home lose out. So it's a loy chasar. It's not normally rented out. The guy living there are two kinds of people. Some people, they pay money to live in houses, or they pay money to rent houses. Other people, if they're not going to live here, they'll find another place to live for free. They don't pay money for their domicile. They don't pay money for their residence. Though by hook or by crook, they're going to find a free place to sleep. They move on. First they go to their first cousin, then their second cousin, then their aunt, then their nephew, then their niece. They don't pay money to live anywhere. There are people like that. Says the Gemara, if we're talking about a home which is not rented out, and we're talking about a guy that doesn't normally pay rent, so basically, what do we call that? Zeh loy nene v'zeh loy chasar. The guy living there has no hana by living there, because if the owner of the house wouldn't let him live there, he'll go live somewhere else for free. So you're not giving him any monetary benefit. It's zeh loy nene, and the owner of the home is loy chasar, because he doesn't rent out the house anyway. So of course you're pater. Again, if it's a home which is not ordinarily rented out, and the guy living there doesn't ordinarily pay rent, it's zeh loy nene v'zeh loy chasar. So you're pater. Of course you don't have to pay for living in the home. That's for sure your pater. Ella, rather, we must be talking. B'chatzar dekayimo la'agra, a courtyard or a home which is normally rented out. V'gavra da'avad l'megar, and a guy who normally pays rent. So listen carefully. Ella, you have to say we're talking about a case where this home is normally rented out. The guy who owns this apartment, he's a real estate tycoon, a real estate guru, or he just wants to make a living. He rents out this residence. Every month or every year he finds someone to live there. And if you move in there, nobody's going to rent it out from him. Nobody wants to rent out a house where you have some bum sleeping there already. So you're causing a loss to the owner. So a home which is normally rented out, now, and the guy, we'll say we're talking about a case, the guy normally pays rent to live in a house. So if he's living in that house, he's getting hana. So what is this case called? Zeh nene v'zeh chasar. The guy living there is getting hana, and the owner of the house is suffering a loss. So the Gemara says, of course you're chayav to pay money. The guy living there is benefiting, and the guy whose home it is losing out. So then it's pashut, you have to pay. So basically, right, we have two cases so far. Right, Azriel? You got the two cases? If the guy normally pays rent, and the owner normally gets rent, so you are getting a hana, the person staying there is getting a hana, and the person who owns it is losing out, of course you got to pay. If we're talking about a case where the owner doesn't normally rent it out, and the guy staying there doesn't normally pay rent, so you didn't give him a hana, and you didn't cause a loss to the owner, so it's zeh loy nene v'zeh loy chasar. So also you don't have to pay. So the two extreme cases are pashut. Zeh nene v'zeh chasar. If one guy is getting benefit and the other guy is losing out, you for sure have to pay. If you're not getting benefit and the guy's not getting a loss, you don't have to pay. Says the Gemara, what's the shaila? B'chatzar deloy kaima la'agra. We're talking about a home which is not normally rented out. So by you staying there, you're not causing a loss to the owner because the owner doesn't rent it out anyway. But the gavra da'avid l'megar, the guy normally pays rent to live in a place. So by him living there, he's deriving benefit. So what is that called? Zeh nene v'zeh loy chasar. The guy living there is getting hana because if he wouldn't live there, he would have to pay elsewhere. And the owner of the home is not losing out because if this guy is not going to be there, he wouldn't get rent from someone else anyway. Zeh nene v'zeh loy chasar. That's a question. Do you have to pay for benefit you get that does not come at the cost of someone else's loss? Right? Remember this? This is a famous shaila. Zeh nene v'zeh loy chasar. The Gemara says, what's the halacha? Mai matzi amar le mai chasarticha. Could the guy living there say, what do you want from me? I'm not causing you to lose out at all. Oidilma, or maybe matzi amar, the owner of the home could say, ha'as hanis, I'm giving you hana. I'm giving you hana. That's the shaila. Could you charge somebody if you give them benefit and you don't lose out? Could you say to the guy, look, I gave you a tangible benefit. Pay me. Or could the guy say back, very nice, you're a great guy, but you didn't lose anything. I don't have to pay you because you didn't lose anything. Do we say ha'as hanis? Or do we say haloi chasar ticha? How many cases did the Gemara bring out? 3. The Gemara discussed ze nene v'ze chasar is for sure chayiv. The Gemara discussed ze loy nene v'ze loy chasar is for sure pater. And the Gemara says it's a shaila about ze nene v'ze loy chasar, where the guy normally pays rent and the owner of the house normally doesn't usually charge rent. The Gemara forgot about one case, it seems. There's one case the Gemara could have discussed. The Gemara doesn't discuss, right? If you have 2 variables, how many possible cases are there? There are 4 cases. Which case did the Gemara not discuss? Ze chasar v'ze loy nene. What does that mean? Let's say the owner of the home normally rents out his home, but the guy living there normally doesn't pay. So the owner of the home is losing out because him being there is stopping him from renting it out to somebody else. But the guy being there is not getting any hana because he doesn't pay normally. So it's ze loy nene v'ze chasar. And for some reason the Gemara doesn't discuss that case. Just for your yediyos, okay, right? You got what the Gemara does discuss? The Gemara does discuss ze nene v'ze chasar chayiv, ze loy nene v'ze loy chasar pater. And the shaila is ze nene v'ze loy chasar. Why didn't the Gemara discuss a case of ze chasar v'ze loy nene? The guy lost out, the owner of the home lost out, but the guy living there didn't benefit. So this case, just so you should know, is a machlokes rishonim. Tosfos says you're for sure pater. That if you cause a guy a loss by living there, because he could have rented it out to somebody else, but you were not nene because you don't normally pay, you're for sure pater. You know why? What am I paying for? Because I got benefit? Excuse me, what am I paying for? I didn't get benefit, I don't normally pay. Elamai, you lost out. What does that got to do with me? You say because I caused it. It's a grama. Grama ben nezaken is pater. If you cause someone an indirect loss, you don't have to pay for it. Grama ben nezaken pater. Says Tosfos, I'll bring you a much more extreme example. If I take you and I pick you up by your lapel, yeah, and I remove you from your home, and I lock your door and I bar it closed, and you have nowhere to live, so you have to go rent, you have to go down the road and stay in Holiday Inn for a week. Do I have to pay you or not? Absolutely not. You hear this chiddush? I come, I knock on your door, you open up, I pick you up by the lapel, I throw you out, I lock your door, and you have to pay rent somewhere else for a week. I'm pater. Why? I didn't cause you a loss. Yeah, but you indirectly caused me to have to rent somewhere else. Grama ben nezaken pater. So certainly, if you normally rent out your house, and me being there stopped you, but I'm not being nene because I don't normally pay, what kind of loss am I causing you? A grama. Because of me, you can't rent it out to someone else. Says Tosfos, you're pater. The Rosh and the Rif argue, and the Rosh and the Rif say like this. If you go into someone's house and you pick him up by the lapel and you chuck him and the guy has to stay in Holiday Inn, you're pater because you only indirectly caused him damage and you didn't consume that benefit. But if you stay in someone's house who ordinarily charges rent, and by you staying in the house, he can't charge rent, even though you don't pay rent, so you're not being nene, but at the end of the day, the loss that you're causing him, you're consuming for yourself by taking it. Now, it's not a consumption that is a benefit to you because you don't pay for it, but you're consuming it. Memela, the Shita, the Torah, and the Rosh, and the Rif is your chayiv. So this is a case the Gemara doesn't discuss, and amazingly, that case is machlokes rishonim. But the case the Gemara discussed, and the case that we're going to discuss tonight, not such a long shiur, is ze nene v'ze loy chasar. You live in somebody's property, it's a benefit that you would ordinarily pay for. However, the guy doesn't charge rent, so he's not losing out by you being there. What's the halacha of ze nene v'ze loy chasar? Everybody got the scenario? You're getting a benefit, but it's not coming at someone else's expense. That's the Gemara Shaila. And the Gemara continues, an amazing Gemara. Listen, this it's kedai to come to the Shiur just to hear the next line of Gemara. So Rav Chisda tells Rami Bar Chama, boy, did you blow it. You missed this great discussion we had in the Beis Medrash last night about Zenen of Zeleichas. So Rav Chisda said, I can't believe it. It's such a pasha to Shaila. We're on the first narrow line in number 2. Rav Chisda says, it's a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah. Rav Chisda says, which Mishnah? Rav Chisda says to Rami Bar Chama, which Mishnah? Rami Bar Chama said, I'm not telling you. Get down on your hands and knees and serve me, and then I'll tell you. If you serve me, then I'll tell you. So what did he do? So Rav Chisda took Rami Bar Chama's cloak, he folded it for him, and then Rami Bar Chama said, okay, now that you serve me, let me tell you. So all the Mefarshim wonder, what's going on here? Why is Rami Bar Chama only teaching him Torah if he serves him? So I'll tell you a very important klal. This is what Rav Shimon Shkop explains the Gemara. Very often, you hear somebody say something, and you say, whatever. Doesn't make any sense. And you dismiss it. But if, let's say you heard the Gadol Hadar say it, let's say you heard Chves, you heard Rabbi Yashiv said it, Rabbi Shach said it, then before you dismiss it, you would try to figure out what does the person mean, because you know the person is so great that he must really know what he's talking about, and the lack is not in the person who said it, the lack is in me. But often, because of our gaiva, we sort of say, whatever the rabbi said, he probably doesn't know what he's talking about anyway. So Rami Bar Chama knew that if he would tell Reb Chisda what his proof was from the Mishnah, Reb Chisda would say, it's not a proof. Rami Bar Chama said, I'm not telling you until you humble yourself before me, and once you have the proper humility, then I know you'll exert the effort to try to understand what I'm saying, and then you'll come to the right conclusion. But if you just have a certain attitude that, whatever, he's a smart guy, then you'll just dismiss what I'm saying, because it requires a certain degree of effort. So Rami Bar Chama advanced the following proof. Listen very carefully. Says Rami Bar Chama, the Mishnah says earlier in Baba Kama that if you have fruits and you put it in it, whatever, it falls somewhere in the Rosh Hashanah. Let's say you had a big barrel of apples, and the apples fall in the Rosh Hashanah, and a cow comes along and eats them. The Mishnah says that the owner of the cow has to pay the owner of the fruits for the amount of hana that the cow got. Mishalemes lefi ma shenehenes. You have to pay in accordance with the hana that the cow got. That's what the Mishnah says. Mishalemes ma shenehenes. So says Rami Bar Chama, what do we see from here? That if you get hana from somebody, you got to pay for it. So Rava comments, wow, boy, did Rami Bar Chama get away with a proof. That's a proof. You could dismiss that proof in a second. Why? Because of course if you have fruits in Rosh Hashanah and a cow eats it, the owner of the cow has to pay. Because the cow is nene, and the owner of the fruits was chasar, it's pashat. It's zen nene v'zeh chasar. Our question is, if you live in someone else's house without permission, and the guy doesn't normally charge for it, so you're nene and he's loy chasar. What in the world is Rami Bar Chama saying? Rebbeinu Shalom. Everybody knows zen nene v'zeh chasar is chayiv. The question is zen nene v'zeh loy chasar. So Gemara says no. What Rami Bar Chama would say back is, fruits in Rosh Hashanah is loy chasar. Because the owner basically gives up hope from it. He doesn't think he's ever going to get it back. He's miyayish, so to speak, from ever getting those fruits back. So the cow is nene, but the owner of the fruits is loy chasar. I'll tell you one proof that the Gemara tries to bring, and then we'll come to the punchline of the Gemara. The Gemara says the following case. You have two fields, two pieces of real estate. A guy on the inside, Reuven's on the inside, Shimon's on the outside. Now, around Shimon's exterior perimeter, Shimon has a fence. But right now, there's no fence in between Reuven on the inside and Shimon on the outside. And Shimon decides, enough is enough already. Every day, Reuven's animals are coming into my field. I need to separate. I need to know what my territory is. So Shimon begins to build a fence. On one side, now, in order to make the fence complete, it's going to have to surround Reuven on the inside. On what? On four sides. Otherwise, the animals could just come in and out. So Shimon makes one wall, two walls, three walls. Now, Has Ruvain on the inside benefited yet? Not really, because it's still open on one side. Says the Gemara, if he made 3 walls, then Ruvain does not have to pay. But that's mashma, that if Shimon would have made all 4 walls, Ruvain has to pay. But Ruvain is nene, and Shimon is loy chasar. Shimon's not losing anything. Anyway, Shimon has to make the fence. So it's Ruvain on the inside is nene, and Shimon didn't lose any money because of Ruvain. Says Gemara, no, Shimon did lose money, because Shimon could say to Ruvain, if you wouldn't have been here, I wouldn't have had to make a fence at all. So it's zenene v'zeh chasar. Then here's the key. This is the key to the sugya. Okay, ready? We're skipping all the back and forth. So when you come home tonight, your wife's going to say, or your friend's going to say, or you could say to yourself, what's the halacha? You have to walk out of here knowing what's the halacha of zeh nene v'zeh loy chasar. This way, tonight, when the neshama goes up there, you're going to get a faher, they're going to ask you, no, tell me, zagibur, what's the halacha? Zeh nene v'zeh loy chasar. You'll be able to tell them. So you have a better, hopefully they'll say, okay, could go back down tomorrow. Okay, you learned something today. So listen carefully. The Gemara quotes the following statement. If you look on your sheet, this is already Chaf Amud Beis, and the Gemara on your sheet, it's the 4th line on the 2nd column. Tashma Rabbi Yehuda Omer Hadar b'chatzar chaveroi shaloi midaitoi tzarech lahalois lo ischar. If you live in your friend's house without reshus, you gotta pay. Finished. Black and white. You can't get more explicit than that. The Gemara brings a statement, Rabbi Yehuda. If you move into your friend's house without permission, you have to pay. So what would you say this proves? Zenene v'zeh loy chasar chayiv. Right? You don't get more black and white than that. It says Hadar b'chatzar chaver shalom midaitoi tzarech lo ischar. Shma mina zenene v'zeh loy chasar chayiv. Says the Gemara, no. It's not a raya. It's talking about a new house. Shani hasam, there's different mishum shachri rusa da ashaisa. It's because, you know why you're chayiv? Because of the blackening of the walls. Now, if you want to know what blackening of the walls are, come to my basement, and you'll see, after a few weeks of a freshly painted basement, the color of the paint is not the same of that it was when we painted it. Why? Hands, feet, balls, toy, right? It's called the blackening of the walls. When you live in a house, you cause a depreciation of the value of the home. The paint is chipped, it's dirty, this, that. It doesn't look fresh anymore. Says the Gemara, you know why if you live in your friend's house without permission, Rabbi Yehuda said you're chayiv? He was talking about a brand new house. A brand new house, when you live in there, it's zenene, but it's zeh chasar. The Shiloh was about a case, if you live in your friend's house without permission, it was an old house. After a year, there's no difference between a year and a week and a year and a month. But there is a difference between a brand new house and a month-old house. So if it's a month-old house, it's zenene. The guy living there gets hana because he normally pays rent, and he's causing a loss to the owner. Here's $1 million question. Okay? You accept that? How much in this neighborhood does a home go for rent a month? What is it? $3,000, $4,000?
$5,000.
What? $2,000?
No. $5,000.
$5,000? No. About, what is it? $4,000?
About
$4,000. Okay. $4,000 a month. So let's say 2 weeks would be about $2,000. Let's say the family moves in for 2 weeks and they darken the walls. Let's put a value of the depreciation of the darkening of the walls. So you have to repaint that room, $200 depreciation. So just because they caused the value to go down $200, now they have to pay $2,000 for all the hana? Think about what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying, really, I'll tell you, zenene v'zeh loy chasar pater. Why did Rabbi Yehuda say Hadar b'chatzar chaver shalom midaitoi chayiv? Because it's a case of zenene v'zeh chasar. Because you're causing a depreciation of the value of the house because of the darkening of the walls. But the darkening of the walls are only a few bucks. So what do you see from here? The Rishonim point out that even if the house depreciates $1, We throw on you the entire value of the hana. Why? But I was then at $2,000. If I wouldn't have caused the $1 damage, I wouldn't have to pay anything. And now that I caused the $1 damage, I have to pay the whole thing? What's the logic of that? Why should that be? So I'm going to tell you two logics. Very important in understanding Dinei Mamnais. One logic, I think it's a Talmud Rajva. It's like this. And Tosfos says like as follows. If I get hana and you're not losing out, why would I not have to pay you? You benefited me. Why do I not have to compensate you for my benefit? Well, because you didn't lose out. So what if you didn't lose out? Tosfos in Masechta Bava Basra, look at number 3. The Gemara in Bava Basra says the following line: we sometimes force people not to be like in Sodom. What do I mean by that? If I'm giving you a benefit, and it doesn't cost me anything, I'm not losing out, then you could say to me, why do I have to pay for it? It hurts you that I'm getting something? It bothers you that you're being a nice guy and you're giving me something? You don't lose $1. Why do you want me to pay? So you gave me $1,000 benefit, but it didn't take any time. You didn't lose any money. Why are you charging me? You're like the people of Sodom, where it hurt them to help somebody. This is called koifenoi sayamida Sodom. And we actually impose such an idea. We tell somebody that if you're benefiting somebody else and it's not causing you a loss, you can't charge them money. What are you like? You're like the people of Sodom, who they made rules against being nice. But if the guy caused you a loss, even $1, then I could say, I'm allowed to charge him for the benefit. But he could say back, what are you? What does it bother you that I benefit? So what do you mean, what does it bother me? You bothered me. You caused me a loss. But it's not commensurate. It doesn't matter. Once you're causing me a loss, I have the moral right to charge you for the benefit. The only reason I can't charge you for a benefit is because Bezin says to me, come on, be a sport. It didn't cost you anything anyway. Really have a right to charge you if I benefit you. The only thing is, the counter argument is, don't be such a bad person. Don't be such a there's a good word for it that we're not going to use. What? Cheapskate. Don't be. Be a nice guy. Be a good sport. It's not causing you a loss. Once there's a loss, once there's a chaseros, once there's a depreciation, then the guy has the moral right to say, "Look, I benefited you. You got to pay me." Another way of looking at it is as follows. Let's say, according to the man de Omar, zenene v'zelei chasar pater, which means if you come into my house and you normally pay rent, but I don't normally charge rent, so you're getting a hana, but I'm not losing out. So if after the fact you moved in, you don't have to pay me. But let's say I'm standing there with a bat, and I'm saying, where do you think you're going? And you say, what do you mean? Zenene v'zelei chasar pater, I'm moving into your home. I said, get lost. If you then override my protest, of course I could charge you. I don't want you to be there. So just like initially, if I try to stop you and you ignore it, I could charge you money. Then if you cause me a loss, it's like anan sadi, it's like clear and obvious that had I known about it, I would have stopped you. And the same way, if I do stop you, I could charge you. If you cause me a loss, then it's like we know for sure I would have stopped you. That's the way, there's a Sefer Shaus HaTshuvos Amudei Eish, that's the way they explain it. Bottom line is, what's the halacha? The Gemara's conclusion is, Zanene v'zeloi chasar is a machloikes amaram. Some amaram say chayiv, some amaram say pater, but everybody agrees that if you cause the guy a loss, even if it's only minute, then we throw on you the entire value of the hana. Okay? So now, coming back to our original shaila, during this war in Gaza, where they were shooting missiles at the nearby city, and Ruvain decided to move into, or how did we say it? Shimon moved into Ruvain's house without permission, and now Ruvain comes back. Could Ruvain charge rent to Shimon? So basically, this is a classic case of zenene. v'zeh lo chasar. So what do we have to do? We need to look in the Shulchan Aruch. How does Shulchan Aruch paskin regarding zenena v'zeh lo chasar? What?
He broke down his door.
He broke down his door. So you say, so he was chasar. Okay, so that was my own, I added that detail. He got in. He picked the lock and he fixed it, there was no loss. Let's say the case, we'll have to conjure up a case where there's no obvious loss. So, very important to know. How does the Shulchan Aruch pass? Look at number 6. Choshen Mishpat, Siman Shin Samach Gimel Sivav. Hadar b'chatzar chavero shalom midaitai. If you move into your friend's house without permission, she'amar loy, say if you told him leave, v'lo yatzin, he didn't leave, chayiv litin loy kol schar, then you for sure have to pay. If the guy says leave, you got to pay. V'im lo yamar loy, say, but if he didn't say anything, im oisa chatzar ein asir lischar. If this is a home which is not normally rented out, so it's zeh loy chasar. Eino tzarach lahalos loy schar. You don't have to pay him. The Mechaber continues, even though the guy living there normally pays rent. Why? So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, Zeh nene v'zeh lo chasar potter. Okay? So everyone should walk out of here tonight knowing the halacha. That if you get benefit from someone and he doesn't lose out, you don't have to pay him. That's the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. The Rama adds that what would be if the guy does normally rent out his house? So then it's zenene, v'zachasa, you for sure have to pay him. Listen carefully. What if the guy normally rents out his house, it happens to be that this month he decided not to? Do we go by what he usually does, or do we go by what he does now? The Rama says we go by what he does now. And if this month he decided not to, and you moved in, so it's zenene, v'zalechasa, you're pater. That's the key to the sugya. So look at number 7. We have a tshuva. Shalos tshuvas afar kesasa da anya. By raise of hands, do we have anyone here who comes from Romania, Romanian blood? Nobody who's willing to admit that they have Romanian blood. But the author of the Shalos tshuvas afar kesasa da anya was Rav David Schwarber, one of the Gedolei Rabbani Romania. And he has Shaila in the year Tafresh Ayin Hey, 1915. There was a war, and a lot of people abandoned their homes, and some people moved into the abandoned homes. And when they came back, the Shaila is, do they have to pay rent? Well, says the Shalos Tshuvas Afar Kesasa the Anya, they absolutely do not have to pay rent. Why? Zeh nene v'zeh lo chasar. But here's the problem. Because the Rama in number 6 in Siman Shin Samach Gimel Sivav, the $1,000,000 question is, but a guy who normally rents out his house, then if you live there, you're chasar, you're causing him to lose out. So it's zeh nene v'zeh chasar. So the shaila is, are most homes today, do people rent them out when they're vacant, or do they not rent them out?
No.
What would you say?
No, they don't. They don't.
Usually they're empty because there's sometimes people.
When people own homes, do they just leave it vacant, or do they try to make money off of it?
No.
They leave it vacant.
That's maybe you come from Forest Hills, but in the rest of the world, when people have homes,
But now in the time of Airbnb.
what?
But now in the time of Airbnb, people are renting out rooms.
I don't know. I think in Israel, people have apartments, even if they vacate for a week, especially before Pesach and Sukkot. That's when they make their money. No question, people rent it out. The Ramah says like this. Now, it's true, there are some people. When I go away, I'm not renting out my house. I don't want somebody, messing up my house. I don't want anyone in my house. Doesn't matter how long I go away. Even you're not coming when I leave. You could come there when I'm there. When I'm not there, I don't know what you're going to do. You're going to host a Wednesday night shiur in your home. You're going to order food. I don't know if you're going to clean up. Bottom line is, I'm just joking, don't worry, we're friends. Bottom line is, Ramah says, stam homes are rented out. If you have a house and you don't know, is this a house which is normally rented out or not? The lashon of the Ramah is, stam batim bizman hazeh kaimi la'agra. Most homes bizman hazeh are normally rented out. Therefore, you would think then, that these people who vacated their homes during the war, The person who lived there normally would have paid rent, and you're causing a chasar to the people who vacated because the stama house is normally rented out. Says Afar Kasasa Anya, wait a second. But there's another Ramah that we mentioned. The Ramah said that even if a person normally rents out a house, but if let's say this time he wouldn't have rented it out, that's called like Kaimi La'agar. Now, even someone who normally rents out a house, I don't think you could get much for it if your house is on the war front. Where are you going to put it? Classifieds. Great view of the artillery that's flying overhead. Come live in my home. If you have a home on the war front, you ain't getting anything for it at that time. So even though the Ramah says most homes are normally rented out, but not at a time of war, so Mamela, it's then but it's Chasar. There's no question that the guy who owns it is not losing out, because even if he normally rents it out, he could not get anything at this time. Plus, the Afar Kasasa da Anya says one more factor, a very important factor. Let me tell you one more factor, and then we'll close it up. Look at number 8. The Gemara over there continues. The Gemara Bava Kama continues. Adaf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. And the Gemara brings two opinions why, if you rent out somebody's house without permission, you don't have to pay him rent. Says the Gemara, look at number 8. Amar Rav Schayra, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Hadar b'chatzar chaveiro shaloi midaitai ein sarach lahalos lo schar. If you live in your friend's courtyard without permission, you don't have to pay him. Mishum shenemar ushia yukas shar. Shia tears down the gate. Now who's Shia? Ushia yukashar. Shia rips down the gate. Who's Shia? So Rashi says two pshatim. There's a demon. The demon of destruction is called Shia. The Shia demon tears down homes that are vacant. You ever wonder? Here you have a house, nobody's living there. You go in there, it's like torn apart. But nobody was there. Shia was there. Who is this guy? He's a demon. He rips down homes that nobody's inside. Memela, if you live in someone else's house without permission, it's not you're getting hana and he's not losing out. You're getting hana and he's getting hana. Because if you wouldn't be there, Shia would rip up his house. And by you being there, you're protecting his house from being ripped apart by the demon. Or the Gemara says another aspect of why it's better if a house is resided in, and that is a home that's inhabited will continue to be inhabited. Which means like this. The Gemara says, Amar Mar Baravashi, by the way, the Gemara says that Mar Baravashi saw this demon Shia, and he gored like an ox. Then the Gemara says, Rav Yosef said, a home which is inhabited will continue to be inhabited. Meaning, very often, somebody just told me that they went away for a week and they came home, their house was flooded. Why? There was a little leak, but over the course of the week, there's nobody to monitor, no one to report it. But if somebody is living in a house, if anything goes wrong with the house, they could take care of the issue. So the Gemara says it's beneficial to somebody to have somebody living in their home, right? Often people go away, they pay they're house sitters. There's something called a house sitter. And the Gemara wants to know what's the difference between the benefit of being in a house to keep Shia out, or the benefit of the house to inspect and monitor to make sure there's no damage. The Gemara says the difference would be if, let's say, the homeowner vacated, but he used it as a storehouse. So if he used it as a storehouse, Shia is going to move out, because Shia only attacks completely vacant homes, but you don't have the advantage of somebody monitoring what's going on. So says this Shaus Shus Afar Kasasa Da'anya, very interestingly, that during war, people would want someone to be in their home. They wouldn't want others to invade the house or soldiers to rip it apart. And therefore, during a time of warfare, it's beneficial to the owner to have somebody go into their home. And therefore, the Afar Kasasa Da'anya Paskins L'maisa, that during this war of 1915, when people vacated and others moved in, we paskin zenene v'zeloi chasar pater. You'll say, but normal house is rented out, so it's chasar. No, you don't rent out a house during war, and besides that, it is beneficial to the owners to have somebody living in their home. One last point that Rabbi Glatstein brings up is: wait a second. During the war of Gaza, when Reuven moved in, or when Shimon moved into Reuven's house, there's no question Shimon caused Reuven a loss. What's the loss? The loss is he used his water, he used his electricity. Those are bills. That's a loss. So this would be a case then of zenene, v'zeh chasar, which l'chayra, everybody would say you're chayiv. To which Rabbi Glatstein says three things. Three reasons why ultimately, during this war of Gaza, the people who moved into others' houses are pater. Number one, even if you want to say that you caused the loss, but it's not considered a benefit, because you living in this home, this guy can never get any value for his home at this time. It's not a value that has any market value. It's not a hana that has market value. Imagine if the guy would try to sell a rent of his home for a week during the war of Gaza. He won't get anything for it. So it's not a benefit that has a market value, so it's not really considered hana. Besides that, says Rabbi Glatstein, the owner of the house would want someone to be there to protect it from ganavim. And the third argument, and this is something that I like very much, is very oila al hadas, and that is when the Gemara says that if you cause a minor loss, you have to pay for all the hana. That's if in your consumption of the hana you cause the minor loss. But if the loss is unconnected to your hana, it's a sort of an outside loss, an unconnected loss, a loss that has no connection to the benefit that you got, then we don't say because you caused a small amount of loss, now you're charged with all the hana. So says Rabbi Glatstein, the use of the water and the use of electricity is like a davar chitzoni, is like an outside, extraneous loss that you caused the guy. So bottom line is you're going to have to pay him for the water and the electricity, but we're not going to tack on you all of the hana that you got just because you caused that loss, because that loss is really unconnected to the benefit. And therefore, bottom line, Rabbi Glatstein says, during that war, if people moved into other people's homes, now if they would have protested and said, no, you can't move in, of course you would have to pay. But since it was without their knowledge, bottom line is, halach lamaisa, Rabbi Sai, let's just get the four rules. Zenene v'zeh chasar is chayiv. Zeh loy nene v'zeh loy chasar is pater. The case of the machlokes rishonim is zeh chasar v'zeh loy nene, Tosfos says pater, the Rosh says chayiv. And our case that we discussed tonight, zeh nene v'zeh loy chasar, we paskin pater. But normal houses b'zman hazar are normally rented out, so it would be chasar. But at a time of war, nobody's going to rent out their homes, so it reverts back to being a classic case of zeh nene v'zeh loy chasar, and the halacha is pater. Everyone should have a wonderful evening. Shkaya.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.